There's a moment that quietly ruins more financial futures than bad investments ever will. It's not when you're broke. It's not when you lose your job. It's when you look at average income by age and think, I'm fine. That moment feels harmless, comforting even. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because average income isn't just a number, it's a sedative. It convinces you you're doing okay when you're actually standing still. It makes you compare the wrong way, set the wrong goals, and spend money like progress is already guaranteed. This video isn't here to shame you. It's here to wake you up. Today, we're walking through income by decade. Your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. I'll show you exactly where the bottom 25%, the middle 50%, the 75th percentile, the top 10%, and even the top 1% actually land at each stage of life. But more importantly, I'll break down 3 goals for every decade that actually move the needle. Not motivational fluff, not hustle cliches, but behaviors that change your trajectory. Before we look at a single number, you need to understand one thing. Averages lie. They get distorted by extreme outliers. Median, and sometimes the 75th percentile, tells a much more honest story, depending on where you live and how you spend. So here's the real question as we begin. Are you trying to figure out where you stand, or are you subconsciously looking for permission to stop pushing? Because every decade comes with its own trap. Not an investment trap, a behavior trap. Before you look at a single income number, you need to understand the trap that number creates. Because if you compare the wrong way, you don't just feel wrong, you start acting wrong. This is where most people quietly sabotage themselves. Let's clear one thing up first, quickly, without turning this into a statistics lecture. Average income is calculated by adding everyone's income together and dividing it by the number of people. That sounds fair. It isn't. A small group of extremely high earners can drag that number way up. And when that happens, average income stops describing most people and starts describing almost no one. That's why average creates two completely opposite and equally dangerous illusions. For some people, it creates panic. You look at the average and think, I'm way behind. I must be failing. For others, it creates comfort. You see yourself slightly above average and think, I'm doing fine. I can relax. Both reactions are wrong. That's why median income matters more. Median shows you where the middle actually is, where the majority of people land. And if you live in a high cost of living area, places like San Francisco or New York, the 75th percentile often becomes a more honest benchmark because the entire distribution shifts upward. Here's the key point most people miss. There is no single correct number to compare yourself to. There is only a correct reference point for your situation. And when you pick the wrong reference point, you trigger psychological traps that have nothing to do with investing and everything to do with behavior. The first trap is what I call the illusion of okayness. This is the moment you look at a chart and think, I'm not rich, but I'm fine. Not struggling, not desperate, just okay. And that feeling is incredibly dangerous because okay kills urgency. It convinces you that what you're doing right now is good enough, even if it's only good enough to keep you exactly where you are. You stop pushing your savings rate. You stop questioning lifestyle upgrades. You stop being intentional, not because you're lazy, but because your brain has accepted a false sense of arrival. The second trap is the comparison trap. This one works both ways. Some people look upward, at the top 1%, and feel inadequate. They see someone their age earning triple their income and think, what's the point? I'll never catch up. Others use that same comparison as an excuse. Well, I'm not a hedge fund manager or a tech founder, so obviously I can't expect more. Different emotions, same outcome. In both cases, comparison becomes a way to disconnect from your own trajectory. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Comparing yourself to the top 1% almost never improves your financial decisions. It just distorts them. And then there's the third trap. The quietest one of all, lifestyle creep. Your income goes up, your spending follows, and your net worth stays exactly where it is. On paper, you're progressing. In reality, you're running in place. And the reason this trap works so well is because it feels rational. After all, you earned it, right? The problem isn't spending more. The problem is spending automatically, without anchoring your decisions to a real benchmark. This is why we need rules before numbers. So here's the framework for the rest of this video. Think of your financial life as a series of battlefields, not milestones. Each decade, your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, comes with its own terrain, its own enemies, and its own traps. And each one requires a different strategy. But none of those strategies work unless you first choose the right comparison point. Not average, not the top 1%, but the percentile that actually reflects the life you're trying to build. Because this video isn't about chasing impressive numbers, it's about protecting momentum. You don't need to know what the top 1% is doing to become wealthy. You need to know where you are, so you don't accidentally destroy the progress you've already made. Once you define the right benchmark, the next step becomes clear. We stop asking, am I ahead or behind? And we start asking a much better question. What is the single most important behavior I need to get right at this stage of my life? That's what we're doing next, decade by decade. Your 20s and your 30s look close on the timeline, but financially, they are completely different games. At 20, most people are still in the education phase. You're figuring things out. You're underpaid. You're inexperienced. At 29, you're something else entirely. You're a young professional. You've got skills. You've got leverage. And that gap matters more than people realize. By age 29, the average income sits around $73,900. But here's the part that actually matters. Most people in their 20s are still earning under $100,000 a year. Six figures feels like it's everywhere online. In reality, it's rare. And then there's the outlier that breaks people's brains. The top 1% in their 20s earn roughly $396,000. That number does damage, because if you don't understand the context, it either makes you panic or it makes you give up. So let's talk about what actually goes wrong in your 20s. The first trap is the "I don't need a system yet" trap. You tell yourself, I'm young, I'm not making real money yet, I'll get organized later. So money leaks. Subscriptions you don't notice, lifestyle upgrades you don't track, savings that only happen when something's left over, which is rarely. Not because you're irresponsible, because there's no structure. The second trap is even worse. The "I'll start investing when I make more" trap. This one feels logical. Why invest small amounts when they don't seem to matter? Because time is the asset you're burning. Every year you delay building the habit, you're not just missing returns, you're missing compounding behavior. That's why the goals of your 20s are boring on purpose. Not flashy, not impressive, but foundational. Goal 1. Build a simple money framework. Automation beats motivation every time. Automatic transfers into savings or investments. Basic spending tracking. Your first retirement accounts. Not perfect, just consistent. Goal 2. Keep fixed expenses light. This one hurts people's feelings, but it works. If you can live with family longer in your 20s, you're buying speed. If you can't, you still need guardrails, because the numbers are brutal. The average car payment is $766 a month. The average renter spends about 32.8% of their income on rent, and the average person spends over $1,080 a year on subscriptions. You don't need to cut everything, you just can't let all three drift upward at the same time. Goal 3. Prioritize skills over savings totals. Your bank balance in your 20s doesn't define you. Your income curve does. Job hopping early, taking on responsibility, building credentials. These aren't grind tactics, they're leverage. Because if you do your 20s right, you don't win yet, you just don't sabotage the setup. And then your 30s arrive. This is where things get dangerous. At age 35, the numbers look better on paper. Average income, $82,950. Median, $60,000. Top 10%, $167,000. You're earning more, you feel more stable, and this is exactly when people lose the most ground. Why? Because life gets expensive fast. Marriage, a house, kids, upgrades that feel justified because your paycheck can handle it now. This is the decade of money leaks. Your income rises, your spending races to catch it, and your net worth flatlines. That's the core trap of your 30s. You mistake higher income for financial progress, so the rules have to get sharper. Rule 1. Think in 5 to 10 year costs. Don't ask, can I afford this year? Ask, what does this cost me over the next decade? That single reframing kills most bad upgrades instantly. Rule 2. Save half of every raise. If you go from $100,000 to $110,000, you didn't gain $10,000. You gained 5. Save 5, spend 5. Your lifestyle improves. Your future stays protected. Rule 3. Eliminate all debt except your mortgage before 40, if possible. Your 30s are prime compounding years. High-interest debt is friction you cannot afford. And even if you can only invest a little, it matters. 5% of a $60,000 salary is $3,000 a year. At an average 8% return, That alone can grow into over $600,000 by age 65. Not from intensity, from consistency. Here's the twist most people miss. Your 20s aren't about being rich. They're about learning the rules of the game. Your 30s aren't about grinding harder. They're about not losing what your higher income makes possible. Because a raise doesn't make you wealthy. Your reaction to the raise does. Get that wrong, and your 30s undo your 20s. Get it right, and you quietly set up everything that comes next. By the time you reach your 40s, something important changes. You're no longer guessing. You're no longer experimenting. You're finally playing with real money. And that's what makes this decade so dangerous and so powerful. In your 40s, income usually peaks or comes close to it. The average income rises to about $95,600. With the median around $67,000. The 75th percentile pushes past $117,000. On paper, this looks like success, but this is where people split into two very different paths. One group uses their peak earning years to buy freedom. The other uses them to buy pressure. Same income, completely different outcomes. The trap of your 40s isn't ignorance, it's overconfidence. You finally have cash flow, so you add obligations. A bigger house, more lifestyle commitments, long-term costs you don't fully model, and suddenly, even at your highest income, you feel boxed in. That's why the first goal of your 40s is not investing harder, it's getting clear. You need a retirement number, not a vague idea, an actual target. A simple rule of thumb is planning to live off 4 to 4.5% of your invested assets per year in retirement. That one number changes how you see everything. It tells you whether you're early, on track, or late, without panic. The second goal of your 40s is to make sure your income arrives before your obligations do. College costs, home repairs, aging parents. These aren't surprises. They're scheduled. Your peak earning years are when you absorb these future hits, not when you ignore them and hope for the best. And the third goal is reducing major debt aggressively. If your 30s were about becoming debt-free except for your mortgage, your 40s are about positioning yourself to enter your 50s with breathing room. Because pressure compounds just as fast as money. Then your 50s arrive, and the rules change again. This surprises people. The average income in your 50s actually dips to around $91,000, with the median closer to $63,000. In fact, median income tends to peak around age 52. Roughly $70,000, and then declines. That doesn't mean failure, it means reality. People step back, they change roles. They trade intensity for sustainability, and this is where mistakes become expensive. In your 30s, a bad decision can be corrected. In your 50s, time doesn't cooperate the same way. So the primary goal of your 50s is preservation. This is when going all in on growth becomes reckless. You start shifting from concentration to balance. From pure equities to a mix that includes bonds, fixed income, treasuries, cash, and CDS. Not because you're scared, but because the downside matters more now. Capital you lose in your 50s doesn't just reduce returns, it reduces options. The second goal of your 50s is understanding your actual spending needs. Your kids are likely out of the house. Your lifestyle stabilizes. This is the first time many people can accurately estimate what retirement will really cost. A common guideline is the 80% rule, planning to spend about 80% of your working income in retirement. Not perfect, but practical. The third goal is taking advantage of your final acceleration window. In 2026, people over 50 can contribute up to $32,500 per year to a 401k, compared to $24,500 under 50. IRA and Roth IRA limits also increase to $8,600. These aren't just numbers, they're catch-up opportunities. Miss them, and you don't get another shot. Then come your 60s. This is the decade people misunderstand the most. Around age 65, the median income hovers again near $70,000. The average looks strange, often much lower, because many retirees are no longer counted as income earners. What you're seeing here is the last ones working, and by this point, the game is no longer about growth. It's about clarity. Your first goal in your 60s is simple. Your house should be paid off. A paid-off home lowers risk more than almost any investment decision. Your second goal is an estate plan, if anyone depends on you. Not having one doesn't just cost money, it creates chaos. And your third goal is certainty. No more guessing. You know how much you need. You know what you have. You know how withdrawals work. That clarity is the real reward. Here's the thread that connects all of this. Each decade asks a different question. Your 40s ask, can you turn income into options? Your 50s ask, can you protect what you've built? Your 60s ask, can you live without financial anxiety? And the answer isn't more clever strategies. It's fewer mistakes at the wrong time. Because money doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards timing, discipline, and restraint. And that brings us to the final truth of this entire video. Here's the takeaway most people miss. Average income by age was never meant to judge you. It was never meant to tell you whether you're winning or losing. It's a tool to choose the right reference point. Median for most people, the 75th percentile if your cost of living demands it. And once you choose that reference point, it gives you something far more valuable than validation. It gives you direction. Because every decade comes with its own behavioral traps. Your 20s tempt you to delay structure. Your 30s tempt you to spend growth before you lock it in. Your 40s tempt you to turn peak income into pressure. Your 50s tempt you to chase returns when preservation matters most. Your 60s tempt you to avoid clarity when certainty is what creates peace. Winning with money isn't about discovering better strategies. It's about not sabotaging momentum at the wrong time. The people who quietly build real wealth aren't always the smartest in the room. They're the ones who understand where they are, what matters now, and what behavior actually moves the needle in this decade, not the next one. So let me ask you something. Which decade are you in right now? Your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s? And what's the biggest trap pulling at you today? Lifestyle creep? Debt? Comparison? If you want, drop 2 numbers in the comments, your current income and the percentage you're saving or investing. I'll tell you which 3 goals matter most for your stage, and which distractions you can safely ignore. And if you want a full 2026 financial plan broken down by age group, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, let me know. I'll build it next. Because the most dangerous moment in your financial life isn't when you're struggling. It's when you look at a number, feel relieved, and stop pushing. Don't use data to put yourself to sleep. Use it to navigate. You don't need a number to feel comfortable. You need a plan to feel free.